a lot of y'all, when you are focusing in writing your dissertation, it's coming from a standpoint that I'm writing and I just need to say and regurgitate what other scholars have said. No, that is not what you need to do anymore. Now that you know better, you can do better with your literature reviews. One thing I know is that the literature review holds a lot of students up from finishing their dissertations, not because you're not capable of doing the work, but because you don't understand the strategy. Are you a doctoral student who is just drastically avoiding writing their literature review? Is it that every time you sit down to write, you're like, shoot, I got to go back and read. And then when you go back to read, you start getting your books, you just pick them up and you're reading through them. You keep looking through. Even when you sit down to write your literature review, you pull out for folks the APA manual, you're trying to figure out what to do. And you're still stuck with your literature review, right? You know, you have to do all these things, you have to do all the formatting, but you just don't know how to get it done. The reason why is because there are three mistakes I see a lot of doctoral students make when writing their literature review. And on this episode of From AV to PhD show, I'm going to share those three reasons and what you can do to avoid them so you have dissertation success with your literature review in 2025. My name is Dr. Ramon Goings, and I'm founder of Done Dissertation and host of AVD to PhD show. And our goal at Done Dissertation is to help doctoral students write and defend a dissertation in 1 year or less. And today's episode is sponsored by our upcoming workshop on December 8th, 2024. It's all centered and focused on the literature review because we know that a lot of doctoral students like yourself are trying to figure it out, but need some strategy and support. And so what I want you to do is, if you're interested in learning more about the literature review after today's episode, I'll bring this back again towards the end, is that go ahead and register and learn more about how to write your literature review and avoid these mistakes that I'm going to show you in this video. And then in the workshop, we're going to build on those mistakes and show you actually how to write and implement the whole structure of your literature review, either for your dissertation. It's also going to be used in coursework. So if that's you, make sure you come to the workshop. You can go to www.thedonedissertation.com/lit review, or you can scan the QR code that is here on your screen. So let's get into today's episode of avoiding these three mistakes on your literature review in 2025. Look, I am really tired and I really don't want to see folks out here making these simple mistakes that you can instantly avoid. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you all, because I actually like writing literature reviews. This is one of my specialties as an academic writer. It's something that I do all the time. I actually enjoy this part of writing. I know for a lot of folks, if I had to capture what is the most often question we get at Done Dissertation, it's centered on the literature review. But there's three big mistakes that if you avoid them, it will make your life a lot easier. And so the first mistake I want you to consider and start thinking about now is this idea that you might be falling into the literature reading abyss. You might not be thinking about it now, but you have certainly fallen into this abyss, right? And so what does the literature review abyss look like? It looks like how I started this video. Every time you sit down to write your literature review, you first go back, oh, let me pull out my manual on how to cite. And then, oh, there was a literature that I forgot. Let me pull out this book, and then, oh, there's another book I want to read. And all these things start to add up. And you start saying, I have to read, because how we're taught to think through the literature review process is first we have to read. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you're not going to read at all, but there comes a point in part of your journey is that you've read enough. And one question I get from doctoral students all the time is, hey, Dr. Goings, how many articles should I read for my literature review? You want to know what my answer is? It depends. And I know you probably hate that answer because faculty tell you that all the time, but it really does depend. There's no set number. And if anyone tells you, oh, you got to read 50 pieces or you got to read 100, it depends. Some of you all are writing in research areas that are heavily studied, so there might be a lot of literature. There might be too much. Some of you all are writing about topics that have been studied for, a century or so, and you might, have thousands and thousands of pieces in your area. So it's not realistic to read everything. It just really isn't. You have to decide, and this is what happens with your literature review, is that, and I talked about this yesterday when I was doing a workshop with students at Lee University, and we talked about this with writing the literature review, is that when you keep your literature review smaller in scope and your study smaller in scope, it allows for your literature review to be more narrowly focused. And so let me give you an example. Let me say if my research project was focused on mental health for collegiate athletes, for instance, right? The intersection of mental health, or maybe, and put it like this, like a mental health intervention I wanted to run for student athletes at the college level, let's say, for instance. That's a pretty broad topic. There's a lot on mental health. There's a lot on student athletes. Where I might be able to then narrow my topic down, so help me focus my literature review, is that, okay, I might still focus on the mental health interventions for collegiate athletes, but maybe I focus on maybe women's basketball, or maybe men's soccer, or maybe I know that gymnastics is more of a solo sport, that I want to look at a solo sport versus a team sport. Making some of those decisions with your research project will keep your dissertation narrower in scope. And because of that, your literature review will be more focused. And when your dissertation is more focused, it allows your reading to become more targeted. When you have a very broad topic, writing a literature review could be very challenging because it's like you feel like I have to pull from all these different areas and how do I bring it all together because there's so much. But a lot of times you fall into the abyss. But also with that, when folks are falling into that literature review abyss, here's something else that's happening. Sometimes we go into that abyss because we're trying to avoid writing. I know this for a lot of y'all. We're perfectionists. You're in this doc program. You want to be excellent in your work, right? Those are the type of people we work with at dissertation. Because of that, you become hyper focused on the reading and sometimes use it as a crutch in order to avoid the writing because you have all these concerns and mental beliefs about what will happen once you do the writing. When those thoughts are, my writing is not going to be perfect, so my chair and faculty are going to carve it apart. I want to save you some time on that. They're going to do that anyway. So don't even worry about it. Your job is to get the ideas out and get them onto the paper. There's no need to get caught up just stuck in reading because, again, this process requires you to do the writing. So reading is one piece. Once you take enough, literature in, you should be able to talk from an informed perspective about your research area. And one of the red flags we know when you may have not reached the reading abyss quite yet, because some of y'all may not have read enough, what we see when you haven't read enough is that we start to see you leaning on the same 2 or 3 articles or scholars over and over again. And regardless of your research area, there are multiple people writing about it, but your job is to be, take all the information is create a synthesis of what's happening. But a lot of times that becomes a challenge for you all. If this is resonating with you so far, let me know in the comments, or if you have any questions as you're thinking through the reading abyss, let me know. And I'd be happy to do more content related to this because I know a lot of students are just struggling with their literature review. So with that said, that was number one. When we think about the first mistake that doctoral students often make is falling into the literature reading abyss. Now, mistake number 2 is that a lot of y'all are not knowing the difference between synthesizing and summarizing. And look, I know that's a big thing for y'all, synthesizing versus summarizing. That is a huge challenge in the literature review because oftentimes folks don't understand the difference between the two. And what I typically will see in a literature review draft, more often than not, is more so of a what we would describe as more so summarizing the literature versus synthesizing. And so with that, I'm always an instructor, so I want to give you all some insights and things to consider when thinking about the differences between synthesizing and summarizing. So when we're thinking about this, when we're thinking about summarizing, these are the features. When professors are saying that you're summarizing, here's what's happening. Your writing is essentially just regurgitating what other scholars have found. And that becomes a problem because your voice becomes missing from the literature. So you can't just regurgitate what everyone else has said. Another aspect of that is that a lot of times what you'll get is because your voice is missing and because you're just regurgitating is that you may get feedback from your chair or committee that just says, hey, your writing sounds like an annotated bibliography, or you're quoting too much. It's usually some of those things that I see people who get, kind of feedback around that they're doing too much summarizing. And don't get me wrong, summarizing is needed, right? But it is not the only thing that you're going to do in the course of your writing. But a lot of times when you're doing these things, you continue to do them, and as a result, it keeps having you make this same mistake over and over again because you want to summarize, because that's how sometimes we're taught as writers in order to approach the dissertation. However, I want you to and give you something a little bit different to consider when we're thinking about the summarizing and synthesizing. And so if I was to summarize, just so you can see what this looks like in writing, this is what happens. And this particular information, some of this comes from our Elevate Your Academic Writing training. So if you're interested in learning about that, you can grab and get a little bit more information about getting help on academic writing by going to our Elevate Your Academic Writing training. But take a look at what's here on the screen. You see here, first sentence, Goings 2017 conducted a qualitative study on Black male adult learners and found that they had different experiences. Goings 2017B, and A and B means these are different pieces written in the same year for folks who might not cite an APA. If you see, I just went from one article to the other. When you're doing that, you are engaging in the summarizing. Again, summarizing is needed. There are times where we're going to have to summarize, but it cannot be all of your writing. that becomes really important because a lot of us approach our writing our literature reviews just like this, and we wonder why we're stuck. However, if you are now going from more so a summarizing what you see here to a synthesizing, here's how it looks different. Now, when we think about this particular example, and you can pause if you want to take a look at it and just read it, but when we take a look at this particular example, what ends up happening now is that when we are synthesizing our work, we might open up with the opening sentence that says, when looking specifically at Black male adult learners in higher education, the research mirrors the findings that Black men benefit from positive student-faculty relationships in Black male initiative programs. Rosser Mims et al. We have a citation. This is from an actual study that I published, right? So that's why I'm kind of breaking down the process for you. However, there have been some differences in how Black men gain access to these resources. For instance, Goings 2017 conducted a comparison study. Now we get into the same information that I talked about when we were discussing the summarizing, but it happens because first we actually synthesize the literature. And what does that mean in essence? We were able to take what had been published and create a storyline from it. A lot of y'all, when you are focusing and writing your dissertation, it's coming from a standpoint that, look, I'm writing and I just need to say and regurgitate what other scholars have said. No, that is not what you need to do anymore. Now that you know better, you can do better with your literature reviews. Your literature review is you to take all this information in and to make sense of it and find the thread that connects all these studies together versus it being scholar A said this, scholar B said this. That becomes a laundry list. And that becomes what sometimes we would call like a data dump or, a literature dump. But we want to see it woven in. What's the storyline across these articles? That becomes really important. And this is why exactly we are doing and talking about this in depth at our literature review workshop, because we just know that when we're writing a literature review, it's helpful to see examples and how we're going to structure the literature review workshop. It's going to be hands-on in terms of the examples I want to give you all from actual writing so that you can see how these things play out so that you can implement the strategy in your own writing. And so if you're interested in learning more, make sure you register for the workshop. It's on December 8th, 2024. You can go to www.thedissertation.com/lit review, or you can scan the QR code that is here on your screen. So with that said, now that we know and we kind of looked at some of the differences between synthesizing and summarizing, I now want to talk about our last mistake that we see doctoral students make when writing their literature review. And mistake number 3 is that you're being afraid to insert your informed perspective into your writing. I don't know what it is about the dissertation, but somehow when we get to this point that we are, writing our literature review, we somehow take a step back and say, oh, no, we need to just talk about what everyone else is doing. But we don't insert and we don't see as a reader, in terms of myself as a chair or a committee member, sometimes we just don't see yourself inserted into the conversation as the researcher who's bringing these pieces together. And so with that, I want to bring back that example that I showed you all and just kind of point out, where did I bring myself into this literature review? So we have all the earlier work that we talked about in those sentences, right? But now if we look at the blue area, if you will see in the blue, the last sentence is, thus, because Black male adult learners come into college classrooms with a wealth of life and work experiences, they have to be strategic in how they interact with faculty on campus. That was my informed perspective from that literature that I reviewed prior in this paragraph. This is a lot of times the piece that is drastically missing from literature reviews, because a lot of times, again, we approach it with this idea that the only thing that we can do is talk about what other people have said. No, you can insert yourself into the conversation. And here's one thing that I hear all the time, and this is a writing preference, but I think it's time that as faculty, we get over this, and that is the use of I in your writing. It's just baffles me that to this day we still have clients in our velocity coaching program who sometimes get feedback from faculty that say you cannot use the I in your writing. Like, for instance, you might say, I argue that blah, 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 and they get, dinged for it in their work. That is something as writers that you should be able to insert yourself, because if you read literature and you read enough literature, you will see various approaches to writing where people insert and use I in their writing. These are all things that are commonly happening within a literature review and allow you as the researcher to insert yourself into the conversation. Think about it. The literature review is not an objective thing. You as the researcher are pulling these literature pieces together, and even the selection of what literature gets included in your review shows that this process is not objective. It's subjective, because there are some pieces that you can decide to not include, and there are some pieces you decide to include. These are all decisions as a researcher that you make in your literature review. So why not insert yourself into the conversation? We're not saying that you do this the whole time, but when you've done a good job of talking about the literature and weaving that storyline together, it makes quite sense for you to have some logical conclusions based on the literature that you've talked about. These are things that if you are struggling with this and you're like, dang, Dr. Goins, this is like insightful, something I hadn't really considered or I want to learn more about, I would invite you to come to our upcoming workshop that is on December the 8th at 4 p.m. So from 4 p.m. to 15 p.m. Eastern time. It's a Sunday. If you want to attend, you can go to www.thedonedissertation.com/lit review. You can scan the QR code that's here on your screen. Go ahead and pause this. Share this out with some friends. We want to share this with our community of folks who follow us on our social media platforms and folks who are a part of our Done Dissertation text message and email community. So we look forward to seeing you at this workshop, but you need to be there because one thing I know is that the literature review holds a lot of students up from finishing their dissertations, not because you're not capable of doing the work, but because you don't understand the strategy. And so at this workshop, I'm going to give you all our 4-step strategy called the UTIP process that we will guide you through step by step in order to build out your literature review from how to conceptualize it. Because part of the challenge is not only writing, that's one aspect, but the main challenge is that you have difficulties with conceptualizing the dissertation because you think it's just something that you just write about and do and talk about other people's research versus doing the integration of the research. And so this is what we're going to talk about at this workshop. So make sure that you come and attend. And then if you are someone that says, look, I actually want more help than that. I want you to help support me through the rest of my dissertation process. And I really want that hands-on mentorship and guidance from you all, then I would invite you to apply to our Done Dissertation Velocity Coaching Program. And you can schedule a complimentary consultation by going to www.velocitydissertation.com. You can scan the QR code that is here on your screen and check us out and make sure that you decide if you would like to go ahead and schedule a consultation so you can learn more about how we can help you get to the finish line. But with that said, we know the literature review is a big piece for folks, and we wanted to make sure that going into 2025, you do not make the same mistakes that we see so many doctoral students make when they are writing their literature review. Again, just to recap, the biggest one that I think is really important for you all is that you not being afraid to insert yourself into your writing. We want to see you all win. We want to see you all do this work. But if you're not willing to take this one particular step, it is going to be a challenge for you as you go through the doctoral journey. This is exactly why we're doing this workshop. We want to teach you a step-by-step process to write your literature review. We want to show you the mistakes that students make. And we also want to share with you all from some of the students that have been in part of our Velocity program, how they've implemented this strategy around the literature review to write the literature review quickly. Our clients are writing these literature review chapters in their dissertations within 4 to 5 weeks. And you might be like, "Ooh, that's fast." Once you have a strategy and you go to implement and execute, it becomes very simple. And so at this training, we're going to share with you all our strategy, and you can learn from other doctors about how they actually implemented and executed the strategy. So make sure that you attend our workshops in a couple of days from now. So you can go to www.thedonedissertation.com/lit, L-I-T, review. You can pause this video, scan the QR code, and I look forward to seeing you on the 8th. And if you're watching this after the 8th, make sure you tune in because we'll do more workshops and episodes on the literature review. And if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. As of the time of this recording, we're about at 946. And so, or 947 as of today. So by the time you see this, we might be over 1,000 with your help. So please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and notification bell and share this out to a couple of folks who you find that might get value out of this. And if you're watching this on our LinkedIn or Facebook, make sure that you follow us as well. Again, I look forward to seeing you at our upcoming workshop on the 8th. But until next time, I wish you all Done Dissertation. Again, my name is Dr. Ramon Goings from Done Dissertation. I look forward to talking to you all soon and I hope to see you on the 8th at the Literature Review Workshop. Take care and have a great week.